Hey, welcome to my live stream on a widescreen laptop, not a tiny little tablet that I've been using for the last month or so. Wow, I think the quality's better. I think. What do you guys think? Eat Me's here has said hello to everyone. Hello back to Eat Me, dans la ville de Montréal, Montréalaise, Montrealer, speaking my ever diminishing French. Uh, Candy, now you get to see her in all her glory. Let me take care of her as I always do. If you're new to my channel, I wonder if anyone new will show up. Talking about democracy and is it dying? Did we ever have democracy to begin with? But before I start, shake, lay down, speak. Good. Come and get it. There you go. Candy the Wonder Pup. And the quality seems a lot better to me. Seems a lot, the camera is higher definition, I think, than what I had before. Certainly better than the tablet and even better than my old laptop. Danny has shown up. He's got his coffee. I've got Danny and Eat Me, two Montrealers. And we're getting the French going in the chat. Bonsoir. Good evening. Many will know that even if you don't speak French. Bonsoir. Bonjour. Bon après-midi. Good afternoon. All right. What are we today? We're the 4th of February. It is 9:18 p.m. Started a minute or so later than I had this scheduled for. When I put it up for 9:15 or whatever time I put it up for, whatever time I schedule a video for, please, I ask that you give me a few minutes grace because the dog sometimes won't come in the house or something happens with my 11-year-old or goodness knows. Sound and visuals are great, according to Danny. Yeah, it's brand new. Just picked it up today. I found out that my old laptop was, I think the technical term that the those in the know, those with high technical knowledge, they use the term pooched. It is pooched, Pooched. Anyway, what brought this latest stream of consciousness to mind was I had watched a interview involving Stephen A. Smith. I think that's his name. I know it's Stephen A. He's an ESPN commentator, very articulate, very bombastic, a very good broadcaster in the sense that he is incredibly engaging. He forth puts forth his thoughts and his opinions in a very strong, articulate manner. I think it's Smith, Stephen A. Smith. And he has become something of a political commentator. It's like the powers that be have decided to take this man's incredible skill at oratory and have moved him into the political realm. The puppet masters have said, this guy is great at dissecting. Primarily, I think he's primarily NBA focused, but he also talks about other sports as well. And now he's branching into the political realm. And it was him, along with Bill O'Reilly, who's an author, historian, and also a media talking head from, I believe, O'Reilly is Fox News primarily. And O'Reilly has been familiar with Trump for the last 20 or 30 years, so long before his political career. And O'Reilly had expressed the opinion that if Trump manages to get all of his appointees through, meaning RFK Jr., Gabbard, those being the two most problematic of the two, he thinks those have the greatest chance not to be confirmed by the Senate. But if they do go through, he is of the opinion that it basically sends a signal to the world that Donald Trump has near dictatorial powers, that everyone is just bowing, the Republican machinery is basically bowing down and pledging fealty to Donald J. Trump. And it brings up this question of Biden in his exiting address to the American people, his final speech from the Oval Office as President of the United States, his outgoing message was the rise of oligarchy. And now, this word oligarchy, if I hear someone talking about a rising oligarchy, I can almost be assured in my own mind that I'm talking to someone who's a liberal left wing type, because they're parroting back what they've heard the Joe Biden say. Oh, it's an all people love these big words that get thrown at them, and they love repeating them. And uh, you know, pejorative, ubiquitous, uh, narcissist, and now oligarchy is a word that has been foisted into the public discourse, and you're hearing everyone in lines at grocery stores saying, "Well, Biden was right. We're seeing the rise of an oligarchy," and it's like, have you been paying attention for the last 40, 50, 60 years? This idea of an oligarchy is nothing new. George Carlin was talking about it all the way back, before 2008. That's when he died. It was in the last 2, 3 years of George Carlin's life. He died at the relatively young age of 70, and he did a routine and talking about the owners of this country. Forget the politicians, man. The politicians are just there to give you the illusion that you have choice. You don't. You don't have a choice. You have owners. They own you, is part of his routine. And he said, they long ago, I'm talking about the real owners. He says, the real owners, the, um, the wealthy corporate interests. Forget the politicians. I mean, they long ago they bought the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pocket. Yeah, and the fact that the political machinery is owned by a corporate, wealthy, powerful elite. And again, and this idea is nothing new. Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, talked about it in reference to the industrial military complex. That is an oligarchy. All these oligarchies have always been around, but now that it's Musk and other tech type billionaires directing things, now it's a bad thing, and it's like it's always existed. I'm just gonna. Oh, we've got Hank Holiday showing up. So I've got Danny, Eat Me, Hank Holiday, and several others are here as well. You're welcome to fill up the live chat. I can finally read the live chat without having to point at with my finger on a stupid tablet and scroll and try and get it to populate. Now it's here and I can see it all the time. I'm going to be looking at some software. I want to be able to dress things up a bit. And now the camera seems a lot better. Mic is probably a lot better. It's a much newer laptop, it's brand new, although I'm not sure. I know that I don't have the most up to date, but it's a lot more up to date than my old one, which was probably about 7 years old. So, what's going on now? At least this is what's been rummaging around in my little brain. Uh, Danny is writing that we can't forget that Canada is the first quote unquote post nationalist state. Apparently, democracy doesn't exist there, not in Canada, not in our post nationalistic state. This idea that Canada is a post nationalistic state is an idea that was put forward at least by Trudeau and probably by others as well. But I know Trudeau has expanded on the idea that we're moving into the age, we were moving into the age of post nationalism, where we all become citizens of global Earth, planet Earth. And then the next step is to install a form of global governance. And I still think we're marching in that direction. I think I think Donald Trump is providing something of a bulwark against it, but I don't think it's stopping. I don't think it's stopping. And I think what's happening now is that the left is waking up to the fact that, wow, is Donald Trump The presidency of the United States is turning into almost a dictatorial position. What Donald Trump says, Donald J. Trump gets. And um, now people will argue against that and say, well, no, we still have the Senate, we still have the Congress. The Senate has to confirm Gabbard and Patel and Kennedy and Rubio and Hegstead. I can't even say that guy's name. Secretary of, I believe it's Defense. They have to approve it. Well, yeah, they have to approve it. But is it just basically a rubber stamp? Are they just going along with everything that Trump says, providing something of a veneer of accountability, something of a veneer of a democratic, open, transparent process? Or are they simply bowing the knee and saying, you want it, Trump, you got it, Trump? And I think to a degree, that's what they're doing. They're bowing the knee. They're saying, you want it, Trump, you're going to get it, Trump, whatever you want, Trump. And what's going to be interesting is what happens, goodness knows, 4 years, 2 weeks in politics is a lifetime. 4 years is an eternity away. But Trump certainly seems as mentally fit. I detect no sign of cognitive decline. I see no difference in the Trump of today than the Trump of 2020 when he left office the first time. Let me read what's being written. Danny is asking if we still have a Canadian identity. I'm no longer sure what it is. I think it depends where you live. You live in Montreal, so Montreal is very much a massive, cosmopolitan society, cosmopolitan city. Montreal and the arrondissement, the surrounding area of Montreal, very cosmopolitan. Same with Toronto, same with most of our urban centers. The Canadian identity has been very much watered down. I, by contrast, live in Little Brighton, Ontario, uh, population 13,000, give or take. And it's predominantly, I will say, overwhelmingly second, third, fourth generation Canadians. And there is a level of immigration here. We do have newer Canadians coming in. We have not, I wouldn't want to say, I don't know exactly how to put numbers on it. If I say significant, that probably makes it seem larger than it is. But we do have an Indian community. A lot of people from Gujarat, which is a province in India, Gujarati. We have some people who are either from the Caribbean or of Caribbean descent, but overwhelmingly, I would guess that 80% of the population where I live, 80, maybe a bit more, is of European descent, with the other 10 to 20% spread amongst varying communities. Wayne Norman has shown back up. If memory serves, Memphis, Tennessee. Well, Wayne Norman Esquire. So, this question of identity, Canada is splitting, and I think it's true in the United States as well, as evidenced by their most recent election. There's a divide between urban centers, the large urban centers, and between rural areas. And the large urban centers are very cosmopolitan, very liberal. And when you move out into the rural areas, we're far more conservative, far more traditional, to use another word. Everyone's just chatting away. Yeah, Wayne is emphasizing, Memphis, Tennessee, 2 exclamation points, as if there's another Memphis. No, Memphis, Egypt. I guess I think ancient Memphis was in Egypt, was it not? I could be wrong. Let's see. Danny is writing that he was raised on a farm in a small town called Saint Eugene, Ontario. Saint Eugene, Ontario, close to Hawkesbury. Okay, so out in the Ottawa Valley. 850 people at the time. Yeah, and you have a different frame of reference when you're living in a small town like that. Here, Brighton, Ontario, very small town, but we're also impacted by the fact that we have a large number of people who have come into Brighton from the GTA, from the Greater Toronto area, and they simply, they're cashing in their $1 million homes and moving out where the real estate is more affordable. And other people are moving here because they want to live in a country or live in an area that is reflective of the way things were when they grew up. When Toronto, if you were growing up in Toronto in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, Toronto was not overwhelmingly multicultural. Now it is. I was when I first moved here, there was a gentleman, Don was his name, at the church I attended, and he's an old guy and well into his 80s. He sang in the choir, and at the end of every service, he would tell me how many people were in attendance, because to avoid falling asleep, which happens in church, he would count heads. And then after church, we'd have coffee, and I'd say, "How many today, Don?" He'd say, 86, and over 103 with the choir and the pastor and the associate pastor, or whatever the number was. He would give me the number. And I asked him, "Are you a Brighton boy, born and bred? Were you born and raised in this area?" "I just moved in." He said, "No, I moved here from Markham about 10 years prior." And I said, "Really, why'd you move from Markham?" And he said something to the effect of, he goes, "I know it's not the right way to look at things. I know this isn't a popular idea, but I didn't feel like I was living in Canada anymore. I would go into stores or into a coffee shop, and I'd be the only one who speaks English, and it just didn't feel like home anymore." So he moved out to Brighton. And I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of that attitude that brings people out into, they just want to avoid. And I don't think I wouldn't call Don a racist. I wouldn't call him, closed-minded. He just wanted to feel comfortable. Uh, Wayne is telling me that there are actually 5 cities in the United States called Memphis. Okay, news to me. It's like during the time of the eclipses, we found out about all the different cities that had the name Salem. And there are so many Salems in the U.S., and that the arc of the eclipse hit so many of them. And then there was another city name that was popular that came up. Ceo Jamalik is here. Um, Danny wrote, "I need to move back to a small town. They're just the best places to live and raise a family." Absolutely. I don't believe that humanity is meant to be living crowded together, one on top of another. I think you can live, you can breathe. It's much better out in the small communities. I'm going to start singing John Mellencamp's "I was raised in a small town and I can breathe in a small town." So everyone's just continuing to say hi. Um, it's like the curtain is being pulled back. It's like everyone in the world is now being red pilled and woken up to the fact that democracy for the larger part of our lives, and probably all our lives, has been really nothing more than an illusion. The old saying is that the right wing and the left wing both belong to the same bird. That we've had these corporate elites, Carlin, they long ago they bought the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pocket, and that the machinery has been controlled from behind the curtain, and everything we're witnessing is more or less just theater, more or less designed to just give us the illusion that we have a degree of choice in the matter. And now, behind the curtain, with these wealthy, powerful, oligarchical elite types, are they always in agreement with one another? Are they always speaking one voice? Do they all have one shared common goal? Or is it possible that behind that curtain, that there are forces at work and battles going on and competition over whose agenda is going to play out? And I think behind the curtain, I think we're dealing with a multi-headed beast, and that at times the beast is fighting with itself to see who's going to be the dominant player. And right now, Elon Musk is pretty much the dominant player. It looks that way, that he is the dominant force and is international development. Oh, warning, your connection is unstable. Whatever, I just got a message. Theo Jamalik is writing that democracy erodes from the inside out. I was restudying the collapse of the Roman Empire, the fall of the Roman Empire, and one of the seminal events that led to the collapse of the Roman Empire was a large influx, an invasion of people called I think they were called the Goths, or was it the Goths or another group? Basically, Europeans, but from the East, Eastern Europeans basically inundated Rome and destabilized it from within. And I'm trying to remember, I don't think I have the right word. I don't think it was the Goths. I think it was another group. Maybe someone will remember or can look it up. But, and it strikes me, what have we been witnessing, on the US southern border with this invasion of, I don't know how many tens of millions of people over the course of the Biden administration, certainly pouring into the US. Only in this case, in the case of the Roman Empire, it was more or less an invasion of people who were escaping the Huns, who decided to inundate the Roman Empire. Now it's almost like this horde, this invasion, these illegals coming in, that it was an invitation, that they were being invited in, and that we had, in behind that oligarchical curtain, there are forces at work that do not have the best interests of the United States or the Western world at heart. It's kind of a theme of my station lately that we're going to be, we're heading into scary times, interesting times, prophetic times. Let me read what's being written. And Wayne is echoing Theo Jamalik's statement, saying that's a fact. Democracy erodes from within. Eat Me is writing, you need to have your own money when you move in a small town. Hard to get hired when they consider you an outsider. That is true. Nepotism rules in small towns. Theo Jamalik is writing that the greed of the government is the downfall of democracy. There are a lot. I don't think there's any, historians arguing about the reason that the Roman Empire fell. I don't think there's ever one smoking gun single cause. I think that's too simplistic. I think human nature, it appeals to our human nature. We like to find one cause because you don't want nuance, you don't want, complicated. Just give me one reason, one cause. All right, it was an invasion from the East, people storming into the Roman Empire, that caused it collapse. Thank you. That's all I need to know. But there was more to it than that. Was it the Goths? Can't remember. It's just bugging me that I can't remember exactly what the group was. Wayne Norman is asking, you just says I hit the nail on the head. With respect to, I guess, you like something, I said, thank you. Hank Holiday says, Gordon, the God of this world is in the details. Interesting, because I can read that two ways, Hank. But you wrote the God and you spelled G-O-D in all caps. So I'm assuming you're talking about the Yahweh, the maker of heaven and earth. But there's also the prince of this world, also known as Satan. And he's very much at work and very active in the world today, and is constantly whispering in our ears. And I think I heard him whispering at church on Sunday when I heard the pastor of the church say something to the effect that AI can be a good thing and that it can be, it can do good things. It can be used for cancer diagnosis and other diseases and such. And to me, AI We've already opened Pandora's box. When I set up this new laptop, it's integrated with AI. I do not willingly, I do not seek out, I do not want to use AI in any way, shape, or form, but I know that it's everywhere and that I cannot avoid it. It's impossible to avoid. There is AI right now involved on my laptop. It's in Microsoft, it's in Google, it's everywhere. Um, CEO Jamalik writes, we need watchdog groups for government, but these groups cost money. But do the watchdog groups is time consuming? The biggest problem is who watches the watchers. We need watch watch groups, but who watches those groups? We have in the United States, and this is what I love about the American system, you have this ideal of checks and balances. You have the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative branches of government, and each is to provide a check against the other. But if you have one group controlling all three branches of the government, now who's watching them? That's this oligarchy, behind the curtain types who are directing everything. And I think more or less Donald Trump is basically just pulling back the curtain on it. We find everyone is waking up to the fact that this United States Agency for International Development, the money they've been spending, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars on programs to promote LGBTQ ideology around the world. Why are American tax dollars going to fund other government agencies or NGOs, non-government organizations, to promote woke liberal Marxist ideology that basically erodes a country from within? Well, where does the money come from? And this world is going crazy. Amy is writing that. There we go. The Visigoths. Thank you. So the Goth is in it, but the Visigoths. Thank you. I knew I had part of it. Eat Me, I think, wrote that. Thank you. It's driving me crazy. And then Eat Me is writing that the Rubicon was iced over, so they crossed, and the Rubicon River is that river that Caesar crossed on the Ides of March. Beware the Ides of March. And then he went into Rome and was murdered. That's an expression you'll hear on occasion, meaning you've crossed the Rubicon, means you've passed the point of no return. Wayne says that we need a functioning Senate and House with the courage to actually uphold their obligations, but they're not on both sides. The biggest problem is, to what degree, even in the U.S. Senate, are the senators independent from the machine, from this corporate machine? I'm going back again to what Carlin said about these wealthy corporate interests that own the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, city halls, judges in their back pocket. And then he said, now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your retirement money. Because there was talk about that a while ago. There's a large surplus or a large sum of money in U.S. Social Security, and there was talk some years ago. I think it was either under Bush or Obama that they were talking about tapping into it, basically stealing Americans' retirement money. They tax it, they take it off your paycheck, store it away for you, which is a decent idea, provided you can trust those who are entrusted with the money. CEO Jamalik is saying that Mexico is not that country. Eat Me writes, but back then the siege of power had left Rome to Constantinople. Yeah, the Western European Empire, the Western European Empire collapsed in and around in the 400s, in around 500 AD. However, the Eastern Roman Empire, Constantinople, or the Byzantine Empire, as it was also known. It lasted another 200-300 years after the fall of Rome. And um, then we moved into what are most often referred to as the Dark Ages in the Western Roman Empire, devolved into what are called the Dark Ages. C.O. Jamalik is writing, maybe we don't have enough. Danny is saying Roman Empire for $200, $200, Alex. Who are the Visigoths? C.O. Jamalik wrote, you give power to the elected officials, then they enrich themselves, and no elected official thinks their little greed will make things fall. The collective actions erode, people become angry at abuse. And that is what has happened. That's what has happened with the election of Donald J. Trump. The system has become so broken that I'm convinced a large number of Americans simply wanted to see Trump take a sledgehammer to it, take a wrecking ball to it, and drain the swamp, all those. But you know, a guy like Elon Musk, completely unelected, being given the power that he's being given, that is closing agencies. There are going to be lawsuits, no doubt. The U.S. government is an employer, and not everyone who works at USAID is a horrible person. A lot of them are just minions, just little worker bees doing their job, earning their paycheck, and now all of a sudden they're out of a job. And they're individuals who simply go whichever way the wind is blowing. If you want me to be woke, left, liberal, if that's the direction, okay, I'll do it because I got to keep my job. There are very few people in this world who will pick out a hill to die on. They'll rather, I think, a large chunk of the population simply looks to avoid any hill that could result in injury, harm, or death. How do I avoid those hills? There are rare individuals who will seek out, well, no, I'm dying on that hill, and then they'll stick to their conviction. But I think they're few and far between. C.O. Jamalik writes, you give power to the elected officials, then I read that already. Wayne is trying to catch up. Wayne is writing, it's not that we don't have enough. They are powerless, meaning what are their methods of enforcement? They don't have any. The only thing they can do is expose. And that is Wayne Norman's opinion, expressing that as an opinion, that they don't really have any power, that they don't have any means to enforce things. So all they can do is blow the whistle. And we've seen what happened now. Two individuals took video of that had been captured by transportation safety officials, whatever, at that Washington airport. There was video surveillance that I guess was in-house, and they released it. And call it whistleblowing if you want. It's that rather stunning picture that you see of the passenger aircraft coming in and the Black Hawk helicopter flying right in front of it. Bam, big crash. Well, that has now resulted in those two individuals being charged with what I understand is still a misdemeanor crime, but they are being charged. And could that be defined as whistleblowing, getting the information out, letting people know what's going on, and you get charged? Denny, with respect to AI, says that he does not knowingly use AI. Oh, no, we are all interacting with it, whether we like it or not. We live now in the world of the Internet of Things, IoT. Everything now has IP addresses. And if it has an IP address, then we're living in a scary, scary world when you think about it. You can, your TV, your stove, your car, everything has an IP address now. Not everything, but just about everything can have an IP address, and a lot of things have an IP address that you wouldn't know about. And if they're hooked up into this internet, if they're connected to the cloud, they're part of the Internet of Things. And then a lot of people think that AI is, like Chat GPT, that it's a program that runs on a computer, but that we don't interact with it physically, and that AI doesn't have arms and legs. However, with the Internet of Things, drones have an IP address. Drones have an IP address. So can AI control a drone? Cars now have IP addresses. We have self-driving cars. That technology is evolving and they're working on it. When AI is able to access drones, cars, other devices, then it does become ambulatory. And then we're into, I never saw the Terminator movies, but I think we're into something like that. Uh, Eat Me is writing Ostrogoth. They were goth. I don't know. Only thing I know about goths is it was a little bit, it had started to become a little bit of a thing when I was leaving high school. And then it became more as we moved into the 90s. Goth became huge. Everyone dressing in black, black eyeliner, dark. Anyway, uh, CEO Jamalik says that we have given so much power to the government, it will take drastic measures. Something that she's of the opinion, maybe, that I noticed how you wrote it to avoid the W in a certain word, but we're talking about 1860 United States, what happened down there. And don't worry about the there. Wayne, I know you know the difference between them. We all make that mistake. Um, Danny's talking about the fact that the U.S. pays millions to push DEI across the world, but it's not the U.S. It's the corporate sector using the U.S. government as its tool. And it's so good to, that's the one area that I am 100% lockstep, 100% in favor of what Donald Trump is doing, and that's on this whole DEI thing. This whole DEI thing, this whole reducing human beings into categorizing human beings based on any number of metrics, race, religion, whatever. And it needs to be done with, and that's one area I'm thrilled about. CEO Jamalik writes, all sides are enriching themselves and turn a blind eye. Yeah. The individuals, the congressmen, the senators, our own MPs here in Canada, our own senators here in Canada, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. They are totally insulated. They call it the White House, or rather the Washington bubble. In Ontario or in Canada, we have the Ottawa bubble, where these politicians come out of their bubble and they play act that they can empathize with working stiffs like me, and I'm still a working stiff. And they know they're well rehearsed, they're well scripted, they know what to say, they know what buttons to push. But at the end of the day, does anything ever get done? CEO Jamalik writes, businesses are people. These new meme coins, the bribery is in plain sight. Yeah, I always have preferred dealing with small mom and pop shops. I've never liked going to the Walmarts, the Costco's, the whatever, the big box. I'd rather deal with a small, but at the same time, where did I go to buy this laptop? I went to Walmart, right? Why? Because at the end of the day, it's just so much cheaper than going to a small little mom and pop shop. And life is expensive now, incredibly expensive, especially here in Canada, where we have gas at $1.50 plus per liter. and there are 4 point something liters to a gallon of gasoline. So do the math. If you're an American wondering how much Canadians pay for gas, it's insane, and most of it is taxes. We're taxed unbelievably. We have excise taxes, provincial and federal excess taxes on gasoline. Then, on top of that, then they add the HST, the harmonized sales tax, gets added on top of the excise taxes. So we're paying taxes on top of taxes. And then they just added the carbon tax on top of everything. So it's just tax after tax after tax. Gas, if you took off all the taxes, would probably be 80, 90 cents, maybe 70 cents a liter. Now we pay $1.50 plus per liter, not per gallon. And just to give that some scope, if you drive a little Mazda or a little Ford Focus, or your basic small little sedan type car, Toyota Corolla, Honda Civic, that type of car, they have about a 50-liter tank in them. So you're talking 50, 60 bucks to fill a small car with. What used to be when I was a kid, you could $10 and you'd be darn near full. Now it's 5 times that amount. Hank Holiday is writing, government, it's like when you buy a clock from Afghanistan and starts counting down and beeping. Good analogy. Good analogy. Wayne Norman's writing, we, mankind, will never learn. All great civilizations fall, and history reminds us that it is always from within. So we continue to repeat the unfortunate cycle. We're living in a time now where everyone thinks that the way things are now, this is the natural order of things. I was talking about this, I don't know how long ago, a day or 2 or 3, whatever. That the way I was talking to some kids at work about this, you think that the world that we live in, that this is the natural order of things, that this is the way humanity has been organized for all of human history, and it's the natural order, and it isn't. It isn't. For thousands of years, society was ordered completely differently. It's only in this world where and I'll go back to it because I think it is a central key element of what has changed our world so much is the introduction of the birth control pill in 1960. This idea of women's rights and equality in the workplace and everything else. With that, if you take away the birth control pill, we know that everyone, it would be plainly obvious why the separation, the difference, the distinction between men and women. It's only in a world where reproductive quote unquote choice exists, especially with the introduction of the pill. And let's not forget the fact that abortion rights and access are now greater than they've ever been in human history, certainly in the Western world. If you don't want to, in my own native country of Canada, an abortion is legal at any time for any reason, right up until the moment of birth. An abortion is legal. You cannot. No one's done anything wrong. If an unborn child is killed just seconds or a minute before it emerges from the womb, there is a term called partial birth abortion, and it's disgusting. And I don't even like contemplating it. But it happens. And there's nothing, it's completely legal. If parents have 3 girls and they're hoping for a boy, and their conception takes place and the test is done to determine the sex of the unborn child, and it turns out to be another girl, the parents can opt to abort the child. And the old bromide is choice is choice is choice is choice. So are you against choice? And in point of fact, yes, I am. I think unlimited choice is not good. Unlimited anything is not good. But getting back to what Wayne had said about, civilizations always collapse from within. I'm going to push back against not just to be argumentative, but I'm going to push back a little on Wayne that it's always from within and say, I'm wondering to what degree this is happening from without. To what degree are perhaps the Chinese playing in trying to undermine Western, the value systems of Western society and our institutions, and fomenting division in 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 Western society, in the United States in particular, because the United States, it must be remembered, is kind of the bastion, is kind of the it's the in a fashion, it's the birthplace of modern democracy. Yeah, Britain had a degree of democracy prior to the United States, but they were still under the king's rule when the U.S. embarked on the they called it the great, a great experiment that they embarked on in when was the Constitution formalized? 1780 something, 1783. Uh, and I'm remembering it was Alex de Tocqueville was a famous French historian who came over to the United States in the early 1800s during the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, and he wrote a book called Democracy in America, and he coined the term tyranny of the majority. And that was kind of a central theme, that this new experiment in democracy by the Americans would lead or could lead to tyranny of the majority, that the individual rights and liberties of minorities could be impinged upon by the tyranny of the majority. I'm just going to try and catch up on what was written. So I have to wonder, is part of this, at least, yes, it's collapsing from within, but are the seeds for that collapse being planted by foreign players, primarily the Chinese and maybe the Russians as well? Um, Danny says that Jesus is king and he will fix it all, and he will. But I do think we're going to have there's a lot we're going to have to endure between now and then, between the second coming. And who, goodness knows, could be 20 years away, 30 years away, 50 years away. And, the Bible tells us we're to advance his kingdom regardless of the season, and to keep the lamp in our oil, or keep the oil in our lamps ready for that second coming, recognizing that it may not happen in our lifetimes. John 5 has showed up. Everyone's saying hi. Theo Jamalik says they wanted to see Trump take a wrecking ball to certain demographics. See, I don't know about that. I know that he nominated Vivek Ramaswamy, was a nominee a year. He was to be co-czar of the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, with Musk. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy has left, and there's all kinds of talk. Did he get pushed out? Did he leave voluntarily? Did he leave because he wants to pursue the gubernatorial, wants to become the governor of the state of, I think it's Ohio? Don't know. But then we have this guy, Patel, who's obviously Indian, who's been nominated for director of the FBI and is widely expected to go through. I don't necessarily now, in fairness, Theo Jamalik is saying they wanted to see Trump take a wrecking ball to certain demographics. Does Trump have elements within his constituency, those supporters who like to wear white capes, maybe, and that type of individual? Yeah, it would be foolish not to admit that Trump has racist supporters. It goes without saying. Now, do I think he's a racist? No. But regardless, if individuals were choosing, if someone of that ilk, if someone, a white cloak type wearing person was choosing between Biden and Trump, My guess is 99.9% of the time they'd pick Trump. But I don't believe, but personally, I've never been one who's subscribed to guilt by association. So, um, in fact, I hate it. Um, and CEO Jamalik says she works in a prison. They killed the messenger. Oh yeah, okay. Eat Me is writing, Bill Gates, the eugenicist, is unelected, but wields so much power over the entire world. Unelected doesn't mean squat. Look at the WEF. I just saw Bill Gates on just a clip of it here on YouTube or on Twitter. And he was bemoaning the defunding and shuttering of USAID. Um, and saying, what the amazing work they do in promoting his favorite product. I won't say the word, the elephant in the room, some sites refer to it as, and how millions of lives could be lost, and how it could lead to the emergence of another by shutting down USAID, this United States Agency of International Development. You shut it down, you're inviting the next pandemic. Ooh, scary. Anyway, um, CEO Jamalik is writing, these people won't get their flowers, but they are heroes because they knew the video would be buried. Um, I think you're talking about the people the two individuals who released the video from Washington D.C. from the airport of the Black Hawk hitting the passenger jet. Um, Wayne's asking Hank to explain his government and clock reference. He's saying basically that government is a ticking time bomb, is my understanding of what he was saying, Wayne. You get a clock from Afghanistan and it starts ticking and beeping, you're going to think it's a bomb. Well, he was equating that to government. Government's more or less like a ticking time bomb. When's it going to go? That was my understanding. Hank can correct me if I got it wrong. John at one time was talking about being goth and how goth became popular late 80s, early 90s, as I recall. And John was sort of goth millennial, or so. Danny's writing, you can't tell the truth anymore. Truth has become evil because the truth will expose all the corruption, agendas, and nefarious things governments are up to. Everyone has their version of the truth now. And I always like to tie in scripture. It's funny. We live in a world, and I've been quoting George Carlin. George Carlin was a famous atheist. I found his argument in faith, he was going for the laugh, certainly, but George Carlin was a brilliant man, absolutely brilliant. But his views on the nature of God and the divine was very shallow. It was a very shallow view. And in taking a very shallow view, it makes for easy humor. The invisible man in the sky, as if, and are there individuals who conceptualize God as the invisible man in the sky? Yes, there are individuals who do that. But to reduce God to that kind of cartoon-ish, reducing God to a cartoonish like character, just, it's straw man. It's the classic straw man, making that with which you disagree appear stupid and ridiculous. And straw man arguments are the domain of the intellectually weak. Carlin was not an intellectually weak man. He was a brilliant, especially in terms of language. But in that respect, he really didn't do himself any great service. Although, people like to identify with smart people, and Carlin's brilliant. And so they say, see, brilliant guy, George Carlin, listen to him talk. He's incredibly sharp-witted. And if he doesn't believe in God, well, that provides further justification for my lack of belief. And, everything's just random. We live in a random world. Everything just came into being by accident. And if that's true, well, then there is no ultimate right and ultimate wrong. If there's no law, lawgiver, then there's no law. Do what's right in your own eyes. Do what you feel, because there's no judgment, there's no reckoning, there's never going to be a price to pay. So push it as far as you can, get away with as much as you can. There's no, this idea of, for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction. Well, maybe you can cheat that, maybe you can get around it. There's no lawgiver. So if you can game the system, game the system. And that's kind of the world that we've devolved into. And that's why the world is in so much trouble right now, is because a large, and when I talk about the world, I'm talking primarily about our Western world. This is why our Western world is collapsing from within. One of the reasons, not the sole reason, but one of them, is that the core ethic that that built this society up, that core ethic is being torn down bit by bit by bit until there's hardly anything of it left. It's a corpse right now, and we're feeding off the corpse. The blood is no longer flowing in the body that sustains the life of our society, and we're just feeding on that corpse. And once that corpse is gone and there's nothing left to feed on, anyway. Eatme writes, IP addresses always existed. This is how we connected back then. The HTTP protocol is what modernized the web. All I know is that now you have the Internet of Things. I was reading a 4 short story book, a book authored by someone by the name of Doctorow. Not the same Doctorow who wrote the famous American novel Ragtime, but a different Doctorow. And there were 4 short stories in it. And one was about an end time scenario with a disease rampaging through the world. Another one and about a guy who was a prepper and everything that went down. And then there was another one, and it was called, actually, that was the title of the book, Unauthorized Bread. You bought a toaster, and the toaster would only accept bread from a certain company. It was a crazy dystopian little novel. You can check it out sometime. I read it back. I was actually in Cuba at the beginning of 2020 before the insanity happened with COVID. And I was reading this book about a mass pandemic, about the Internet of Things, Big Brother watching everything you're doing, even what type of bread you're buying, because your toaster won't work unless you buy the more expensive bread associated with the toaster. Well-written book. Anyway, C.O. Jamalik is writing, y'all really that upset about white women having jobs? Because it is white women that benefited from affirmative action and DEI. Yeah, that there's a lot to go through in your statement there about white women having jobs. See, at the end of the day, whether it's male or female or white or black or any other race, depending on the type of job, I mean, what type of job are we talking about? Are we talking about firefighting? If someone's coming, and I had a fire one time, this house caught fire once. Thankfully, it was contained. But who do I want coming to put out the flames and rescue my family? The most capable individuals, irrespective of their race, religion, or gender. I want the strongest, fittest, most capable, most competent individuals, irrespective. And when you bring in a system that says, well, we're not going to hire these people because they're, white men are an overrepresented in this profession. So we're full for white men. Now we have to hire men and women, and men make up over half of the workforce already. So we're not going to hire any more men. We're only going to hire women. Well, What do you lower the qualifications if there aren't women who can meet the strenuous physical requirements to firefight? You get into very difficult conversations. And it's not that you want to be, denigrating anyone because of their gender. One of two, male, female. You don't want to denigrate someone because they're female, and you don't want to denigrate anyone because of their race. But if you don't have the competency, the skill, and sometimes it's physical. Sometimes it's physical. Some jobs requires what's next? Is the NBA going to say, we don't have enough short white guys in the NBA. We need that demographic more represented. The the NBA is over men of color who are very tall are overrepresented. Anyway, Wayne's writing that he's just started getting into the whole bit about learning about IP addresses and HTTP, et cetera, and that it's good info. Eat Me is writing, Bobby has 3 albums of The Cure. Bobby has 2 more albums of The Cure. How many albums does Bobby have? Bobby has depression. I never listened to The Cure that much. Danny's writing that the bottom line is that all the governments in the world want one thing, that they want the population to be serfs. It's funny. I'm going to pull out my copy of 1984 and reread it. And I find I'm in the opening to that book. What happens is there's a bunch of people in a pub, probably in England. It's called Oceana in the novel, and this old guy, which is what I'm becoming. I'm an old guy, is screaming that he wants a pint, but they no longer sell beer in pints. Everything's in liters, half liters, quarter liter, and he wants a pint. And they're like, we don't have pints, mate. Or you need a liter. I mean, no, I want a pint. And that's what I feel like I'm becoming. I'm becoming like that old man at the start of at the novel 1984. And another aspect of 1984 that struck me is that it said repeatedly in the novel that any hope to kind of overturn the system, that it has to come from the quote unquote the proles, Proles, which I take to be a shortened form of that Marxist term proletariat, which basically just means the working class. Any hope of overhauling the system and improving things, it's got to come from the ground up. It's got to come from the proletariat, from the proles. And I need to read that novel because I think George Orwell likely had a window into the planning that was in place all the way back at the end of World War II about where the powers behind the curtain wanted to take the world, and that he pulled the curtain back a bit and gave us a window into what was being planned. And that's why, he died very young. He died, I don't even know if he made it to the age of 50. If he did, it wasn't much over 50. And he went into the hospital for something relatively minor and routine and died, kind of the way that Joan Rivers went in for that minor little surgery, minor little procedure, and then all kinds of irregular things happened and she died, coincidentally just after having being asked about uh, is America ready for its first homosexual president yet? And she said, well, we already have it with the Obamas. You can check that out yourself. It's an interesting thing because she said everyone knows that Michelle Obama is a trans. She's a tranny. What? We all know it. It's no big deal. Whatever. That's amazing what she said. Anyway, CO Jamalik is enumerating all the tax they have: federal tax, state tax, sales tax, gas tax, cigarette tax, cable tax, electricity tax, water tax, internet tax. Oh, yeah, tax, tax, tax. Canadians, we have 5 level of governments in this country. We have the federal, provincial, then we have something called regional government, and then there's municipal, and then there are school boards, and they all need revenue. Uh, as bad as it is in the United States, believe it or not, it's worse here in Canada. We pay even more in taxes than you do, but then we have quote unquote universal health care. So it's crazy. Eat Me is writing at Wayne Norman. Back then, it was all about IP. There was extensions to copy the IP addresses instead of the www, the World Wide Web prefix. Why do we say www? It's quicker to say World Wide Web. W, that's 9 syllables. World Wide Web, 3. Anyway, I'm going to leave the HTTP protocol stuff. Okay, getting back to what I was talking about, CO Jamalik's writing, every woman isn't trying to be a firefighter. That's true. Women aren't bombarding fire stations. I'm using it as an example, and sometimes, fair enough. Sometimes when you make an example, you can take things to an absurd level. But I talked about this before. How come we don't want gender equality on oil rigs, or in firefighting, or in mining, or in other what are predominantly male-dominated fields? Why is it only in specific areas that we expect this equality of outcome? Why not in all? And I will submit that it is because there are differences between men and women. We have different capabilities. Our brains do function differently. Gender is a binary. Gender is binary. Gender is binary. They're male and female. However, personality type, that is a spectrum. And there are personality types that we tend to conflate more with the male, and personality types we tend to conflate more with the female. But that doesn't mean, like, one example would be competitiveness. Someone who's considered to be hyper competitive, that's viewed as a male trait. Does that mean that all men are competitive? No, some men are very low on that scale. They're still guys. Just because a guy isn't competitive doesn't mean he's not a guy. He's still a guy, but he's just low in that particular metric. Women, by contrast, are there women who are highly competitive? Yes, incredibly competitive. Does that mean they're not women? Of course not. They're still women. And what determines an individual's success in any particular endeavor quite often isn't, it's personality driven. Sometimes having low empathy is good. Women are viewed typically to be more empathetic than men. And having a lower degree of empathy makes you a better negotiator at times. It means you're more forceful. And if you're in environments that are competitive environments where there's a lot of negotiating going on, then traits that are more commonly associated with men, but not exclusively, women do excel in professions, but typically, like, take Margaret Thatcher, famous Prime Minister of Britain. A lot of people thought she was that her personality traits were very masculine in nature, but that's what the arena kind of demands. Is to succeed in that arena, you need those type of traits. CO Jamalik is writing that in America, Black women always work slavery, sharecroppers, nannies, maids, field workers to professionals. I do think there was a concerted effort that took place, and basically to tear apart the foundation of Black society by removing Black men from the household. And under the Jim Crow era in the South, they would take the young men away and put them onto chain gangs to rebuild the infrastructure of the destroyed South. Now we're getting on to something we're going back, 100 and how many years? 150 years or more into history. Zach is here and writing that a pint of Guinness makes a great meal. It does, high in iron. It's the one thing that I'm not much of a drinker. I don't even have it. I've got one bottle of booze in the house left, unopened. I don't drink. I don't have any beer. I drink only socially, but when I do go out, if I do go out for a drink with a friend, that's what I'll have. I have a stout, Guinness if they have it, or another stout if they don't. Eat Me is writing uh, that her ex sister-in-law was one of the first firefighters in Houston, but lost her job as a fire chief assistant when Annie Porker came in as mayor. I have a friend, a girl I knew in high school, who is actually a fire chief. She's a couple of years younger than me, so she's got to be coming up to retirement. And she went, and very physically fit, very strong woman. Like I have no doubt in my mind that this Moira, that she had the physical attributes required to be a firefighter. Maybe not as good as a guy who's 6'4" with muscles on muscles, but no, she's probably incredibly fit. She could throw someone over her shoulder, carry them out. And Eatme is writing that she was replaced by, quote, a diversity hire in 2012. Healthcare is important. CO Jamalik says that many men are coming into nursing. Absolutely true. 100%. Nursing is becoming more and more. There are a lot, and there's a guy I watch on here. Many of my people on this channel know Dr. John Campbell, and he's a nurse practitioner and retired, and a professor of nursing. And Danny is saying that some of his Hebrew friends say that the www, that it is actually 666. Interesting, because I know that in Hebrew, it's alphanumeric. Every letter also represents a number. They express numbers with letters. And it's not as simple as, I don't know the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph is one letter. I don't know many of the letters in their alphabet, or any. Dreidel. Gimel, I think, is another letter. On the dreidel, that little spinning top toy they have, it has different letters of the Hebrew alphabet, but each of those letters represents a number as well. And I think it's, their first letters 1 and 2, but when you get into higher numbers, how they organize it, I'm not entirely certain. CO Jamalik writes, do you think competition is the only way, and now it's jumping, to come to an agreement? That is a male point of view. Depends what we're talking about. It depends what we're talking about. I mean, there's a tendency, at the end of the day, what happens when you and I are having a discussion like this is that we both want to win. You want to win the argument, I want to win the argument, or we want our point of view to at least have preeminence. So to a degree, it's somewhat competitive. And the biggest problem is that these conversations branch out into a million different directions. And keeping things narrow and focused is incredibly difficult. And typically what will happen is when someone, myself, yourself, or anyone else, when we start to lose, or when we start to lose ground in the debate, then that's when we try to broaden the field of battle. And we try to expand it. Yes, I'm using male terms. I'm ex-military, try and expand the field of battle so that, can divert some of the fire that is pinning us down, and then we can, win. But do I think that competition is the only way to come to an agreement? No. Well, it depends on what what are we trying to find agreement on? Is it a business deal? Anyway, eat me. People believe that Margaret Thatcher was a good leader by bringing socialism into the UK. The Iron Lady was typically, well, she was a neocon. She was in the Reagan mold, and within the context of her own time, she was certainly not regarded as a socialist, but by no stretch of the imagination. She was a conservative, British conservative prime minister. Um, Danny is writing, Guinness is the, best at room temp. It ends up a bit sweeter with a creamier mouth feel. You must try it. I have not tried Guinness at room temp. I've always drank it chilled. Whale oil beef has shown up, waving the checkered flag for whatever reason. CO Jamalik, it has been shown that women doctors are, for the most part, better than men. And I fear the same way. You see, now this is uh, a statement of fact. You come out, and this is done all the time. I've done it. We've all done it. But listen to me, COJ Malik, please. You've just come out and said it has been shown women doctors are, for the most part, better than men. And I know in this type of exchange, it's hard to, where? How do you come to that determination? And this thing, women doctors, doctors of what? Are we talking about medical doctors? Are we talking about doctors of philosophy, doctors of divinity, doctors of whatever, a PhD? Uh, includes medical doctors, includes psychologists, which is not a medical degree, includes, all manner of. You have a doctor of ethics, doctor of philosophy, but uh, and I fear the same way male doctors practice medicine will be the same way male nurses practice nursing. Interesting point. Interesting point. If we're talking about male medical doctors versus female medical doctors and male nurses versus female nurses, what I bet you would find typically is that the men gravitating toward a career in nursing are high on the empathetic scale, that that they have the traits that are typically more associated with female. uh, because it's personality driven, not gender driven. Yeah, this is the biggest problem I had with this whole LGBTQ, the whole transgender stuff. It's this idea that conflating personality type and temperament and things like that with gender. And they're two separate things. Gender is male, female. But personality types is a spectrum that is endless. Anyway, Whale Oil Beef is writing, not nursing. My 90-year-old father's LPN home care worker says he makes 110K per year changing diapers, heating up meals. 1 year education, great, but really, I don't know. And what did you call LPN? I'm used to the acronym PSW, personal support worker. I'm not familiar with LPN. But I assume they're similar. CO Jamalik is stipulating that when her statement about um, women doctors are for the most part better than men, it's referring to women MDs, medical doctors. Eat Me is writing, I've shed my ego as a woman. We live in a matriarchy. Look where it led us. I was breaking CO Jamalika's writing. I used nursing, so it conveyed that it was related to the medical field. Yeah, I was parsing it bit by bit, starting right at the top. Uh, and CO Jamalik says, I worked with a male nurse or male nurses, and they are not. You never met a male nurse who, all men the same? Is that what you're saying? Like any male who goes into the nursing profession, their personality type is prototypical male. I mean, we are a spectrum. And C.O. Jamalik is writing, what matriarchy? Where is the matriarchy? Not the way I want to end my video, with everyone sniping at each other. You know, at the end of the day, we need unity in this world. We're coming up against a big, beastly, monstrous government system, and we're all fighting over what they want us fighting over. They got us fighting over, you know, how many men are doctors, how many women are doctors, how many men are firefighters, how many women are firefighters, are male nurses good or are they bad? You know, and getting us sniping with each other when we need to rely on this book, and why we can rely on this book, and how it has not been uh, substantially changed, altered, edited, manipulated. I'm not going to say that hasn't taken place at all. I'm not going to say that there hasn't been, you know, some manipulation. Certainly there was. The reason that the King James version was authorized was because King James wanted the old Geneva Bible replaced, and it is the Geneva Bible that the Pilgrims, the guys who got into the Mayflower and sailed to Plymouth Rock, they were reading the Geneva Bible, and the Geneva Bible had very pejorative language when it came to dealing with authority figures, with those in, you know, kings, for example, and painted them in a very negative light. And so King James wanted something that was a little kinder to the kings like himself and Nebuchadnezzar and Darius and the Pharaoh. He wanted something that wasn't as heavy-handed on those, you know, because it was an era where they talked about the divine right of kings. And so the Geneva Bible, when the Pilgrims came across and they signed that famous Mayflower Compact, it was the Geneva Bible that they were referring to when they talked about the Bible. Their Bible was the Geneva Bible. Now, and I actually have never had a copy of the Geneva Bible, but I have done some textual comparisons between some passages as related in the Geneva Bible and our more modern renditions. And there are some differences. There are some differences in particular in the manner in which the Geneva Bible, the translations, the way they dealt with individuals like Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, and authority figures. And so there we go. And C.O. Jamalik, I'm not diminishing what you have experienced. If you've experienced it, fair enough. But at the same time, I think you're a smart person. You know that just because, you know, your frame of reference is that doesn't mean that that encompasses the full spectrum. You know, then this is where prejudice basically comes in. I mean, you can't expect to get to know everyone, so we compartmentalize. You know, Chinese people, well, they're like this, and you know, there are cultural norms, there are cultural practices, there are stereotypes around for a reason. But what we're called upon to do, in my belief, is you're to get to know people on an individual basis and not just to lump them in with any old group. Danny's writing, divided we stand, united we fall. He's turning everything upside down. C.O. Jamalik is writing that white men, so that's me, don't want minorities on an equal playing field, and they definitely don't want a white matriarchy. I can honestly say I don't give a rat's rear end, to use one of my favorite expressions. What race a person is with respect to them doing a job. All I care about is their level of competency. Someone's flying the airplane. I don't care if they're Indian, black, white, Sikh, native, Do they have the required skills to do the job? And if they do, Bob's your uncle. Let's go. Uh, and I knew what you meant. Don't worry about the typo, CO Jamal. Eat me isn't sniping. Cannot own others' opinions. It belongs to them. Amy's writing that she believes that women were forced into the workforce by the by the Rockefeller type system. Were women during World War I, during World War II, when the men were off fighting, women largely entered the workforce. Many were happy to get back. Again, I talk about the birth control pill and about how it overturned societal norms that had existed for all of human history, thousands of years, millennia. And now, before the sexual revolution, before the introduction of the birth control pill, were there women who wanted to enter the workforce? Absolutely. I'm 100% sure that there were women. I don't think they were the norm. I don't think they were the rule, but I don't think it was an insignificant number either. Watch the old Waltons TV show. And if you watch their The Homecoming, which was something of a what do they call it when they put the pilot episode of the Waltons? I know that it's mostly old people watching my station, older people who will know the Waltons. But in that pilot episode, Aaron is, when I grow up, I'm going to get married and have lots and lots of babies. And Mary Ellen had the older sister, the eldest girl. She had more of a male type personality. Oh, I don't want to work in the kitchen. I want to go help chop down the tree. No, that's men's work. And for what it's worth, Theo Jamalk is writing about a study done, one male doctors versus female doctors, tracking errors, interactions with patients, etc. I would like to see the study, because so often in studies, what we find, this is why they have the peer review process, you can read it and see where the limitations were in the study. You can read about whether or not it's been replicated, because in science, replication is huge. Just because one study shows one outcome one time, replication, if that's true on a Monday, it has to be true Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every day of the week. If it's true in December, it's got to be true in March and July and every month of the year. And there is quite often bias in studying who financed the study, who was financing it. And quite often studies can be geared towards particular outcomes based on the biased view. We see it in climate science all the time. If you have one of these computer modeled simulations that doesn't predict cataclysmic climatic outcomes, well, then your lab gets no funding. You have to pick the parameters that are going to give a predetermined outcome. That carbon is the big bad boogeyman, is going to lead to planetary destruction. I'm just going to read up the last few. Eat Me says that we, meaning women, I assume, should be caregivers and nursing, not being pushed in the system while strangers raise our offsprings. Is every woman, it's so funny. You could, now that the Pandora's box has been opened, could we go back? Imagine if something happened in the pharmaceutical industry that they collapsed. If all the pharmaceutical drug companies collapsed, and all of a sudden birth control isn't available anymore. And we're back to the days of having to rely on things like condoms and other less efficacious forms of birth control. What would happen to society then? And that's an open question. I think it would have enormous ramifications. But my voice is starting to go. And I think CO Jamalik your point, I think you may be saying it a little in jest, but if that works for you, enjoy it. Yeah, you know, the at the end of the day, I would like to think that we would learn at the end of everything that things weren't as bad as we think they were before. They're not as bad, but they weren't perfect either. And one of the ways they weren't perfect is how we dealt with what I would call the other, someone who doesn't fit the norm. And I think one of the things we got wrong before is that people who stepped outside of what we viewed as the norm, they were not treated well. And I think going forward, the where I would hope we would learn is that when dealing with someone who is outside of the norm, that we'd be more loving, more caring, more welcoming, more friendly, and not, and eliminate a lot of the prejudice that existed before. Um, and there we go. So that's the end of tonight's video. Hope you all like the laptop. I'm looking forward to just watching a bit of this and seeing what the sound and video quality is like back on replay. Uh, Hope you enjoyed a lively discussion. It was a lot of fun tonight. A little bit of conflict is good. And at the end of the day, if everyone's in lockstep agreement about everything, then there's nothing to talk about. And you can assume everything's perfect, but we know that the world isn't perfect. And the thing we need to do is we need to talk. We need to especially confront the uncomfortable issues of the day. Uh, and, regardless of male, female, black, white, Christian, non-Christian, whatever. We need to come together. We need to talk. We need to sort these things out. We need to and do it in the spirit that is. And do I think my little YouTube station is going to change the world? No, but maybe a little bit of the butterfly effect. And most will know that just a small little change here, things can snowball. Maybe maybe this we'll see. Regardless, I enjoy it, and we'll talk to you later. Sio Jamalik, I hope you tune in the next time. I'm going to be talking about this. I want to do some more reading on the Geneva Bible. I want to get my hands on a copy of it to see and read up a bit more on differences between the King James, because it was basically the King James that replaced the Geneva Bible. So, and Whale O Beef loves the reconstituted look, or whatever that word is. Looks like you reconstitute or that's a great word. I'll see what it looks like. Uh, anyway, God bless everyone. I'll end it the way I always do. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord grant you peace. And he will. And I've got Zach writing. The Geneva Bible would have been the Calvinist Bible. Yes, it would have. The King James Version came out, I think, in the year 1611. I think I've got to double check on that. And Calvin and most of Luther and the reform types, they're 1500s, 14th century. So anyway, God bless, and we'll talk to you soon. Night.